The blood on Eli's arm had already begun to dry when he heard her voice behind him. "He will come back," she said, "with more men this time." Eli Blackwood stood on the porch of his cabin, his rifle still warm in his hands, watching the darkness swallow the last of the retreating horses. The wound on his left arm throbbed with each heartbeat, a reminder that he was still alive, still standing, still fighting a battle he had not asked for. "I know," he said without turning around. Through the cabin window he could see her reflection in the glass. Clara Whitmore, 19 years old, skin pale as mountain snow, eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. 3 days ago she had been a stranger. Now she was the reason armed men had come to his door. This time they will not stop until... Her voice trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Eli turned then, looked at her, really looked at her. The bruises on her wrists where the ropes had cut into flesh, the fear that lived permanently in her eyes, the way she held herself always ready to run, always expecting the worst. "They will have to go through me first," he said. It was not a boast. It was not bravado. It was simply the truth stated as plainly as the sky was dark and the mountains were old. This is how it all began. Not with blood, not with gunfire, but with a girl on a train that nobody wanted, and a man who had forgotten what it felt like to protect something worth protecting. 5 days earlier, she was still alive when the rope burned through her skin, not alive in the way people usually mean it, not screaming, not fighting, just breathing in short broken pulls while the summer grass cut into her back. Her dress, once gray and practical, had torn in so many places it barely covered her anymore. Her auburn hair had come loose from its pins and spread across the dirt like a broken halo. The man dragging her did not look back. He pulled the rope attached to her wrists as casually as he might pull a stubborn mule, his horse maintaining a steady walk that seemed designed to maximize her suffering without killing her outright. From the ridge above, Eli Blackwood watched through his rifle scope. At first he thought it was a deer, something wounded, something dying, something that belonged to the natural cruelty of the wilderness. He had seen plenty of that in his 49 years. The mountains were beautiful, but they were not kind. Then the shape resolved itself into something human, and Eli felt his stomach drop. He had lived alone on Blackwood Mountain for 15 years. 15 years of solitude, of work, of trying to forget the things he had done and the things that had been done to him. He had not asked for company. He had not wanted company. The last time he had let someone into his life, he had watched her die slowly, over 6 months, coughing blood into handkerchiefs until there was no blood left to cough. Emma, his wife, dead from consumption in the winter of 1857. Since then Eli had kept to himself. He raised horses. He grew what he needed. He traded in town twice a year and spoke to no one unless absolutely necessary. People in Fayetteville called him the Mountain Man, and they meant it as something between a warning and a curse. But even the Mountain Man could not watch a young woman being dragged to her death without doing something about it. He spurred his horse down the ridge, taking a path through the trees that would bring him out ahead of the man with the rope. His rifle was a Winchester Model 1866, a gift to himself after the war, and he had used it to kill more men than he cared to remember. He hoped he would not have to use it today. He was wrong. The man dragging Clara never saw him coming. One moment he was riding along the trail, rope in hand, whistling some tuneless melody. The next moment, Eli Blackwood materialized from the tree line like a ghost made of leather and cold eyes, his rifle leveled at the man's chest. "Let her go," Eli said. The man's hand moved toward his pistol. Eli shot him through the shoulder before his fingers touched the grip. The sound echoed off the mountains like thunder, sending birds scattering from the trees. The man fell from his horse screaming, clutching his ruined arm. Eli dismounted and walked past him without a second glance. He had learned long ago that men who dragged women through the dirt like animals did not deserve his attention. They deserved only what they got. He knelt beside the girl, cut the rope with his hunting knife. Her wrists were raw and bleeding, the skin torn in places where she had struggled against her bonds. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. She looked at him with an expression he recognized. He had seen it in the faces of young soldiers after their first battle. in the eyes of prisoners newly released from Confederate camps, in his own reflection sometimes on the worst nights. It was the look of someone who had stopped believing that anything good could happen to them. "I am not going to hurt you," Eli said, keeping his voice low and calm the way he spoke to frightened horses. "Do you understand?" She did not respond. She was shaking now, her whole body trembling like a leaf in a storm. Behind them, the wounded man continued to scream. "Can you stand?" A tiny nod, barely perceptible. Eli helped her to her feet, careful to touch her as little as possible, letting her set the pace and the distance. She swayed but did not fall. Whatever else she was not weak. A weak woman would not have survived being dragged through the wilderness. "My name is Eli Blackwood," he said. "I have a cabin about 2 miles from here. You need water and rest and someone to tend those wounds. Will you come with me?" For a long moment she said nothing. Her eyes moved from his face to his rifle to the man writhing on the ground to the trees surrounding them, calculating, assessing, looking for the trap. Then, in a voice that sounded like it had been scraped raw, she whispered 4 words that would change everything. "Do not take me back." Back to where? Back to whom Eli did not ask. Not yet. There would be time for questions later when she was safe and warm and had stopped looking at him like he might be the next person to tie a rope around her wrists. "I will not take you anywhere you do not want to go," he said. "You have my word." She studied his face for another long moment. Whatever she was looking for, she must have found it because she nodded once and allowed him to help her onto his horse. As they rode away, Eli glanced back at the wounded man. He was sitting up now, clutching his shoulder, his face twisted with pain and rage. "You have no idea what you have done," the man spat. "She is property, bought and paid for. When Deputy Madsen hears about this—" Eli said nothing. He simply looked at the man with eyes that had watched thousands die at Gettysburg and Antietam and a dozen other places whose names still appeared in his nightmares. The man's words died in his throat. Some men could kill you with a bullet. Eli Blackwood could kill you with a look. They rode in silence. The trail wound upward through pine forests and across clear mountain streams, climbing ever higher into the Ozark wilderness. Clara sat in front of Eli on the horse, her body rigid with tension, flinching every time his arms brushed against her as he guided the reins. She smelled of dirt and blood and fear. Underneath that, something floral, something that spoke of a life before this one. Lavender, perhaps, or roses. The kind of scent that belonged in parlors and dance halls, not on the back of a stranger's horse in the middle of nowhere. Eli did not ask questions. He had learned in his years alone that silence was sometimes the greatest kindness you could offer a wounded soul. The questions would come later. For now she needed to know that she was safe, that no one was chasing them, that the next thing waiting for her was not pain. The cabin came into view as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks. It was larger than most mountain dwellings built of pine logs and granite from the local quarry, with a covered porch that wrapped around 3 sides and windows made of actual glass. 15 years of work had gone into this place. 15 years of cutting and hauling and building, trying to construct something that could shelter him from the world. Now, for the first time, he was bringing someone else inside its walls. 2 smaller cabins sat nearby, separated from the main house by 100 yards of cleared land. Smoke rose from one of them. As Eli approached, a man emerged onto its porch. Caleb Blackwood was 47 years old, 2 years younger than Eli, and roughly half as intimidating. Where Eli was all hard edges and cold silence, Caleb carried himself with an easy grace that made people comfortable. He had their mother's smile and their father's talent for working wood into beautiful things. The scar across his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a horse that had kicked him when he was 20, only added to his roguish charm. "Brother," Caleb called out, his voice carrying across the clearing, "you have brought company." A second figure appeared beside him. Jonah Blackwood, the youngest of the 3 brothers at 45, was the gentlest and most sensitive. Tall and slender where his brothers were broad with long fingers made for playing the fiddle and a face that showed every emotion he felt. He took one look at Clara, and his expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "She is hurt," Jonah said, already moving toward them. "She is frightened," Eli replied, swinging down from the horse. "Do not crowd her." The brothers stopped their approach, understanding immediately. They had not survived the war together without learning to read each other's signals. Eli reached up to help Clara down, and she allowed it, though her body remained tense as a coiled spring. Inside the cabin, things moved quickly. Eli directed Clara to a chair near the fireplace, while Jonah fetched water and Caleb built up the fire. No one asked questions. No one pushed. They simply worked around her, creating a bubble of warmth and safety in the gathering dusk. Clara watched them with wary eyes, her gaze darting from one brother to the next, cataloging, assessing, waiting for the moment when the mask would slip and their true intentions would be revealed. That moment never came. Eli brought her a blanket and set it on the table beside her, rather than handing it to her directly. Jonah placed a cup of water within her reach and stepped back. Caleb moved quietly about the kitchen, preparing food with the practiced ease of a man who had been cooking for himself for years. It was Silas Morgan who finally broke the silence. He came through the door without knocking, as was his right as the oldest man on the property and the one who had known the Blackwood brothers since before they could walk. 62 years old, with hair turned white by time and a body still strong from decades of hard work. He had been a Baptist minister once back in Missouri before his wife died and took his faith with her. Now he was simply Silas. Friend. Advisor. The closest thing to a father the brothers had since their own had died in a house fire 7 years ago. "Eli," Silas said, his sharp eyes taking in the scene at a glance. "Who is our guest?" "Her name is Clara," Eli replied. "Clara Whitmore. I found her on the East Trail, being dragged behind a horse." Silas's expression did not change, but something hardened in his eyes. "Dragged by whom?" "A man I shot." He mentioned Deputy Madsen. The name fell into the room like a stone into still water. Everyone knew Roar Madsen. Everyone knew his reputation. The deputy sheriff of Fayetteville County was not a man known for his mercy or his respect for the law he claimed to uphold. "The girl is in danger," Silas said. It was not a question. "Yes." "And you brought her here?" "Yes." Silas turned to look at Clara, who had pulled the blanket around her shoulders and was watching the exchange with eyes that missed nothing. "Child," he said, his voice gentler than Eli had heard it in years. "Nobody here is going to hurt you. Whatever happened before, it is over. You are safe on this mountain." Clara said nothing, but something in her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. The tension in her shoulders eased by a fraction. The death grip she had on the blanket loosened slightly. It was not trust, not yet, but it was the first step toward something that might become trust, given time and patience, and the absence of harm. "She needs rest," Eli said. "We can talk in the morning." Silas nodded. "The room at the back of the house. It has a lock on the inside. She can secure it herself." Eli looked at Clara. "You hear that? The room has a lock. You control it. Nobody comes in unless you choose to let them in." For the first time since he had found her, Clara spoke directly to him. "Why are you doing this?" Her voice was rough but clear, carrying an edge of challenge beneath the exhaustion. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Eli considered the question. A dozen answers came to mind, most of them true, but none of them complete. "Because I could. Because no one else would. Because 15 years of solitude has not killed the part of me that knows right from wrong." In the end, he gave her the only answer that mattered. "Because I remember what it feels like to have nowhere to go." Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. Then she looked away and the moment passed. "The room," she said quietly. "Show me." That night Eli sat on the porch and watched the stars emerge over Blackwood Mountain. Behind him the cabin was quiet. Clara had locked herself in the back room as soon as he had shown her the door, and he had not heard a sound from within since. Caleb came out with 2 cups of coffee and handed one to his brother. They sat in silence for a long while, watching the darkness deepen over the valley below. "Madsen," Caleb finally said. "Of all the men in Arkansas she could be running from. I know. He is not going to let this go. Whoever that man was that you shot, he is going to talk. Madsen is going to come here, and when he does—" "I know," Eli repeated. "Do you—" Caleb turned to look at him. "Brother, I have followed you through hell and back. I would follow you again without question. But we need to know what we are getting into here. We need to know who she is and why she is running and what happens if we choose to protect her." Eli took a long drink of his coffee. It was bitter and strong, exactly the way he liked it. "When she wakes up," he said, "we will ask. And whatever her answers are, we will decide together. And if her answers are bad, then we will decide that together too." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed softly, shaking his head. "You have not changed, Eli. 25 years since the war ended, and you still cannot walk past someone in trouble without stopping to help. Is that a complaint? No? Just an observation." Caleb stood up and stretched his joints, popping in the cold mountain air. "I am going to bed. Jonah has first watch, then me, then you. If anyone comes up that trail tonight, we will see them long before they see us." He went inside, leaving Eli alone with the stars and the silence and the weight of a decision that had already been made the moment he saw a girl being dragged through the dirt and chose to intervene. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howled. Eli listened to its lonely cry and thought about the woman sleeping in his back room. She was young enough to be his daughter. She was frightened and wounded and hiding secrets that might get them all killed. And yet for the first time in 15 years, he did not feel entirely alone. Morning came slowly to Blackwood Mountain. Eli woke before dawn, as he always did, and found Clara already sitting in the main room. She looked like she had not slept at all. Dark circles under her eyes, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold. But she was there in the open, which meant something. "The door does not lock very well," she said when she saw him looking at her. "I could hear everything in the night, footsteps, voices. I thought—" She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Eli moved to the stove and began preparing breakfast. Eggs from the chickens Jonah kept, bacon from the smokehouse, biscuits from flour that Caleb had brought up from town last month. Simple food, but warm and filling. "We need to talk," he said without turning around. "About who you are, about who is coming after you, about what happens next." Clara was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "You saved my life. I owe you the truth. You do not owe me anything, but if I am going to protect you, I need to know what I am protecting you from." She nodded slowly. "Where do you want me to begin?" "The beginning." So she told him. Clara Whitmore had been born in New York City in 1854, the daughter of a shoemaker named Thomas and his wife Elizabeth. For 11 years, she had lived a life of modest comfort, surrounded by love and the smell of leather and the sounds of a bustling city. Then the cholera came. Her father was the first to fall. Then her mother. Then little William, her 7-year-old brother, whose eyes were the same shade of green as her own. Clara watched them all die within a single week, helpless to stop it, too young to understand why God would take everything she loved. The city put her in St. Mary's Orphanage, a grim brick building on the Lower East Side where children were warehoused more than cared for. 8 years she spent within those walls. 8 years of cold beds and thin gruel and learning to survive in an environment where survival was not guaranteed. She learned quickly. Do not cry where anyone can see you. Do not show weakness. Do not trust anyone who offers kindness without wanting something in return. These were the rules of the orphanage, unwritten but absolute, and Clara followed them with the single-minded determination of someone who had no other choice. When the orphan train program came to St. Mary's in 1873, Clara was among those selected for the journey west. They told the children they were going to find new families, new lives, new chances at happiness. They lined them up at station after station from Ohio to Missouri to Arkansas and let strangers examine them like livestock at auction. At 19, Clara was too old for most families. Too tall, too sharp-tongued. Her eyes held too much hardness for people looking for a sweet, pliable child to mold to their needs. Station after station, she watched other children be chosen while she remained on the train. Columbus, Indianapolis, St. Louis, Springfield. Nobody wanted her. Nobody even asked her name. By the time they reached Fayetteville, Arkansas, only 12 children remained from the original 47. The unwanted, the defective, the ones that even the desperately lonely frontier families could not bring themselves to take. Then Luther Vance appeared. He was different from the others, Clara said, her voice flat and distant. He did not look at my teeth or ask about my strength. He just looked at me, really looked. And he smiled. Eli had stopped cooking. He stood with his back to her, listening, his hands gripping the edge of the stove hard enough to whiten his knuckles. He told the placement agent he needed help around his house, cooking, cleaning, general housework. He seemed respectable. He had clean clothes and a nice watch and a way of talking that made people trust him. Clara laughed bitterly. I trusted him too, for about an hour. She did not describe what happened next in detail. She did not need to. Eli had been a soldier. He had seen what men did to women when they thought no one was watching, and he had killed more than a few of them for it. I refused him, Clara said simply. He did not like that. But before he could, before anything happened, some men came to the house. They were talking about business. Vance made me stay in the kitchen, but I could hear everything through the wall. What did you hear? Clara looked up at him then, and in her eyes Eli saw something beyond fear. He saw fury, cold and bright and burning like a star. They were talking about other girls from the orphan train, girls who had been placed with families across 3 counties. Except they were not really placed. They were sold, bought and paid for like horses or cattle by men who wanted things that respectable women would not give them. The silence in the cabin was absolute. There was a name, Clara continued, a name that kept coming up. The man in charge of it all, the one who signed the papers, made it all look legal. They called him Tham. She stopped herself, shook her head. A powerful man, a man with a badge and a title and the respect of everyone in the county, a man no one would ever believe capable of such things. Who? Eli asked, though some part of him already knew the answer. Clara looked at him with eyes that had lost their illusions about justice and fairness and the basic goodness of humanity. Judge Harlan Voss. The name hung in the air between them. Judge Harlan Voss, the most powerful man in the county, the man who presided over every court case from property disputes to murder trials, the man who had sent more men to prison than anyone in Arkansas history, the man who, according to Clara Whitmore, was running a human trafficking operation using the orphan train as his supplier. That is why they want me dead, Clara said, because I heard the name, because I know, and because they cannot afford to let me tell anyone. Eli stood motionless for a long moment. Then he turned away from the stove and walked to the window, looking out at the morning light spreading across Blackwood Mountain. Voss, he said quietly. Of all the men in Arkansas. You know him. I know of him. Everyone does. He has been a judge for 20 years. He married the governor's niece. He gives money to churches and orphanages. Eli laughed without humor. He gave money to the orphan train program. Of course he did, Clara said bitterly. It is the perfect cover. Bring in girls from the East. Place them with families. Except some of those families are not families at all. They are buyers. And the girls? She did not finish. How did you escape Vance? I ran, in the middle of the night. I did not get far before his men caught up to me. They tied me to a horse and started dragging me toward town. Clara touched her wrists unconsciously, her fingers tracing the rope burns beneath the bandages Eli had applied. They were going to take me to Madsen, the deputy. He works for Voss. He handles the merchandise that causes problems. And then I found you. And then you found me. They looked at each other across the cabin. 2 strangers brought together by violence and chance, now bound by a secret that could destroy them both. You should send me away, Clara said. What you have done for me, what you are doing, it is more than anyone has ever— She stopped, her voice breaking for just a moment before she brought it back under control. But Voss will not stop. Madsen will not stop. They will come here, and when they do, you and your brothers will be in danger. Eli turned away from the window. He walked to the table where Clara sat and stood across from her, close enough to see the desperation in her eyes and the stubborn set of her jaw. "Let me ask you something," he said. "When you were on that train going from town to town watching everyone pass you by, what did you want more than anything in the world?" Clara blinked at the unexpected question. I wanted someone to choose me, to see me as more than just another orphan, to give me a chance. Someone chose you now. I chose you. My brothers chose you, and we do not give up on the people we choose." Eli reached out and laid his hand flat on the table, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. "Stay. Let us help you. Let us fight this together." Clara looked at his hand, at the calluses and scars that told the story of a life lived through hard work and harder choices, at the steady way he held it, not pushing, not grabbing, just offering. "You do not understand," she whispered. "Voss has the law on his side. He has money and power and men with guns. What do you have?" Eli smiled for the first time since she had met him. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who had walked through the fire of war and come out the other side with nothing left to fear. "I have something better," he said. "I have nothing to lose." Outside, the sound of hoofbeats echoed up the mountain trail. Someone was coming. The hoofbeats grew louder, multiplying in the morning stillness like a drumbeat announcing war. Eli moved without thinking, years of battlefield instincts taking over. He grabbed Clara by the arm, gentle but firm, and pointed toward the back room. "Inside. Lock the door. Do not come out until I call for you." Clara did not argue. She had learned in the orphanage that there were moments for questions and moments for obedience, and the look in Eli's eyes told her which moment this was. She disappeared down the hallway, and seconds later he heard the scrape of the lock sliding into place. Caleb appeared from the side door, his own rifle already in hand. Jonah came from the smaller cabin at a run, his face pale but determined. Silas emerged last, moving more slowly, but with a calm that spoke of a man who had made peace with whatever might come. "How many?" Caleb asked, taking up position beside the front window. Eli peered through the glass. The riders were visible now, emerging from the tree line at the base of the property. 3 men, no 4, all armed. Leading them was a figure in a brown coat with a silver badge glinting on his chest. "Madsen," Eli said, "and 3 others. 4 against 4, Jonah murmured. "Those are not terrible odds." "They are not here for a fight," Silas said from behind them. "Not yet. Madsen is too smart for that. He wants to see what he is dealing with first, test the waters." The old man was right. As the riders approached, their pace slowed from a gallop to a trot to a walk. They fanned out slightly, creating a semicircle facing the cabin, but their hands stayed away from their weapons. This was not an assault. This was reconnaissance. Eli handed his rifle to Caleb and stepped onto the porch. Deputy Roar Madsen sat atop a chestnut mare. His posture relaxed, his face wearing the easy smile of a man who believed himself to be in complete control of every situation. He was younger than Eli had expected, perhaps 40, with the kind of handsome features that made people trust him on sight. His eyes, though, told a different story. They were the pale brown of dead leaves, and they held no warmth at all. "Mr. Blackwood," Madsen said, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. "Fine morning, is it not?" "State your business, deputy." Madsen's smile widened slightly. "Direct. I appreciate that. Some men would offer coffee, make small talk, dance around the issue for an hour. But you go right to the heart of things." He leaned forward in his saddle, and something in his posture shifted. The friendly pretense remained, but underneath it Eli could see the predator beginning to show through. "I am looking for a young woman," Madsen continued, "about 19 years old, auburn hair, green eyes. She ran away from her employer 2 nights ago. There is concern for her safety. Her employer, Eli repeated flatly. Mr. Luther Vance. Fine man. Very worried about his missing housemaid. He hired her through the orphan train placement program, you see. Took her in out of Christian charity. And then she runs off in the middle of the night stealing some jewelry on her way out. Madsen shook his head sadly. Such ingratitude. Behind the cabin window, Caleb's fingers tightened on his rifle. Jonah's jaw clenched. Even Silas, standing in the shadows of the doorway, seemed to grow still with cold fury. Eli showed nothing. I have not seen anyone matching that description, he said. No. Madsen's eyes drifted to the ground to the tracks left by Eli's horse the previous day. 2 sets of hoofprints going out. 2 sets coming back. And alongside them the unmistakable drag marks of something or someone being pulled through the dirt. Those tracks tell a different story, Mr. Blackwood. Those tracks are none of your business. A flicker of something crossed Madsen's face, surprise perhaps at being challenged so directly. Then the smile returned, though it no longer reached his eyes. I am the law in this county, he said softly. Everything is my business. Do you have a warrant, deputy? I could have one within a few hours. Then come back in a few hours. The 2 men stared at each other across the morning air. Around them the world seemed to hold its breath. The other riders shifted uneasily in their saddles, hands drifting toward their weapons, sensing the violence that crackled between their leader and this mountain man who refused to bend. Madsen was the first to look away. You are making a mistake, Mr. Blackwood, he said, gathering his reins. A very serious mistake. That girl is not what she seems. She is a thief and a liar, and possibly worse. By harboring her, you are making yourself an accessory to her crimes. I have not admitted to harboring anyone. No, you have not. Madsen turned his horse, preparing to leave. But he paused at the last moment, looking back over his shoulder with an expression that made Eli's blood run cold. One more thing. The man you shot yesterday, he is in the doctor's care in Fayetteville right now. He has been telling everyone who will listen about the rancher who attacked him without provocation, shot him in the shoulder while he was conducting lawful business. Madsen smiled his empty smile. That is assault, Mr. Blackwood, maybe attempted murder. I could arrest you right now if I wanted to. But you will not. No, not today. Today I am feeling generous. Today I am giving you time to think about your choices. Madsen tipped his hat again. We will speak again soon. Very soon. He spurred his horse and rode away, his men falling in behind him. Eli watched them until they disappeared into the trees at the base of the mountain. Then he turned and went back inside. Clara was standing in the hallway, her face pale, her hands pressed against the wall as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. You heard, Eli said. Every word. She looked at him with eyes that held equal parts gratitude and guilt. You should have given me to them. You should have. Enough. Eli's voice was sharper than he intended. He saw her flinch and forced himself to soften his tone. You are not property to be given or taken. You are a human being. And as long as you are under this roof, no one is going to drag you anywhere. But he will come back. You heard him. He will get a warrant. He will bring more men, and then we will be ready. He walked past her into the main room where his brothers and Silas had gathered. 4 men standing in the morning light, their faces grim, their eyes hard. They looked like soldiers preparing for a battle they knew they could not win, but were determined to fight anyway. We need a plan, Caleb said. We need more than a plan, Silas replied. We need allies. Madsen is just the front man. The real power is Voss, and Voss has the entire county in his pocket. Sheriff, judges, even the territorial governor owes him favors. Then we go outside the county, Eli said. The federal marshals in Little Rock. They are not under Voss's control. Little Rock is 100 miles away. By the time we could get there and back with help, Madsen will have burned this place to the ground. Then one of us goes while the others hold the line here. Jonah shook his head. That is suicide. We barely held them off with 4 rifles. With 3. "I can stay," Clara said from the doorway, every head turned toward her. "I can shoot," she continued, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "One of the men at the orphanage taught me. I am not an expert, but I can pull a trigger and hit something close enough to matter." Eli studied her for a long moment. She stood straight, her chin lifted, her hands clenched at her sides. She was terrified, that much was obvious. But beneath the terror was something else, a determination that refused to break no matter how hard the world tried to crush it. "That will not be necessary," he said finally. "None of us are going to Little Rock, not yet." "Then what?" Caleb demanded. "We find another way. Madsen said the girl is a thief. Voss has built his whole operation on lies and false papers and the testimony of men he controls." Eli looked at Clara. "But you heard things. You know things. If we could find proof—" "The ledger," Clara said suddenly. "What ledger?" "Vance keeps a book. I saw him writing in it the night before I ran. It was in a hidden drawer in his desk. I could not see what was inside, but he was very careful with it, very protective, and when those men came to talk about the other girls, he referenced it several times, told them everything was documented." "A record of the transactions," Silas said slowly. "Names, dates, amounts paid." "That would be enough," Eli finished. "If we could get that ledger to the right people, people outside of Voss's reach, we could bring the whole thing down." "Vance's house is in Fayetteville," Caleb pointed out, 12 miles from here, and after yesterday you can bet Madsen has men watching every road in and out." "Then we do not use the roads." Eli walked to the window and looked out at the mountain rising behind the cabin. The Ozark wilderness stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction, a maze of ridges and valleys and hidden trails that only those who had spent years exploring them could navigate. "I know these mountains better than anyone alive," he said. "There are paths through the backcountry that will take us around Fayetteville without coming within 5 miles of a main road. We could be at Vance's house before nightfall tomorrow." Clara asked. Eli turned to face her. "You know what the ledger looks like. You know where Vance hides it. I need you to come with me." For a moment something flickered across Clara's face. Fear, yes, but also something else. Something that might have been hope. "And the others?" she asked. "Caleb and Silas stay here. Make it look like nothing has changed. If Madsen comes back with his warrant, they stall him. Buy us time." Eli looked at his youngest brother. "Jonah, you ride to the Hendricks farm. Tell them what is happening. Old man Hendricks fought with me at Gettysburg. He will not let this stand." "And if Madsen attacks before you get back?" Caleb asked. "Then you hold the line until I do." The brothers looked at each other. In that glance passed a lifetime of shared history. Battles fought and survived. Losses mourned and overcome. A bond forged in fire that nothing could break. "We will hold," Caleb said quietly, "for as long as it takes." They spent the rest of the morning preparing. Eli packed supplies for a 2-day journey through rough country. Jonah saddled the fastest horse they had and set off for the Hendricks farm before noon. Caleb and Silas began fortifying the cabin, boarding up windows, positioning rifles at strategic points. Clara watched it all with a mixture of awe and disbelief. These men barely knew her. She had brought danger to their door, put their lives at risk, given them every reason to throw her out and wash their hands of her troubles. Instead, they were preparing for war on her behalf. "Why?" she asked Eli as he checked the load on his rifle for the 3rd time. "Why are you doing all this? You could turn me over to Madsen and this would all be over. Your lives could go back to normal." Eli stopped what he was doing. He stood still for a moment, his back to her, his hands resting on the rifle's polished stock. "My wife died 15 years ago," he said without turning around. "Consumption. She coughed for 6 months while I watched helpless, unable to do anything but hold her hand and wait for the end." He finally turned to face her. "After she was gone, I came up here to the mountain. I told myself I was done with people, done with caring, done with the pain that comes from loving something you cannot protect." Clara said nothing. She waited. But here is the thing I learned in all those years alone, Eli continued. The pain does not go away just because you stop caring. It just sits there rotting, turning you into something less than human. I became a ghost, Clara, a walking corpse with a pulse. I stopped feeling anything at all. He took a step toward her. His eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had seen so much death, held something now that looked almost like hope. Then I found you on that trail, hurt, terrified, being dragged to your death by men who saw you as nothing but property. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt something: anger, compassion, the need to protect something worth protecting. He shook his head slowly. You ask why I am doing this. The truth is, I am doing it for myself as much as for you. Because maybe if I can save you, I can remember what it feels like to be alive. Clara stared at him. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever been so brutally, beautifully honest about their own brokenness. I do not know what to say, she whispered. You do not have to say anything. Just stay alive. That is all I ask. He turned back to his rifle, and the moment passed. But something had shifted between them, something fragile and new and terrifying in its potential. Outside, the afternoon sun began its slow descent toward the western peaks. Before they departed, Caleb pulled Eli aside. His usually playful eyes were serious. Brother, Caleb said quietly, I have watched you these past days, the way you look at her, the way she looks at you. Caleb, this is not the time. It is exactly the time, because if something happens to you out there, I need you to know. He paused. Jonah and I, we see her too. We see what you see, and whatever this family becomes, we are in it together. Eli studied his brother's face. In 25 years they had never spoken of such things, but they had also never met a woman like Clara. When this is over, Eli said slowly, we will talk, all of us, together. Caleb nodded. Just come back alive, both of you. They left at dusk when the shadows were deep enough to hide their departure, but there was still enough light to see the trail. Eli led the way on foot, his horse following behind laden with supplies. Clara walked beside him, wrapped in a coat that had belonged to Emma 20 years ago and still smelled faintly of roses. She did not ask about the coat. She did not need to. The mountain paths were narrow and treacherous, barely wide enough for a single person to pass. In places they climbed so steeply that Clara had to use her hands to pull herself up. In others, they descended into valleys so dark that even the moonlight could not reach them. Eli moved through the wilderness like a ghost, his footsteps silent, his body blending into the shadows. He seemed to know every rock, every tree, every turn in the trail. This was his domain, his kingdom, and here at least he was untouchable. They walked for hours without speaking. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had said what needed to be said and now simply needed to exist together in the darkness. Around midnight, Eli called a halt at a small clearing beside a stream. They could not risk a fire, so they ate cold biscuits and dried meat huddled together against the mountain chill. You should sleep, Eli said. We have another full day of walking tomorrow. I do not think I can sleep. Try anyway. Clara lay down on the bedroll he had spread for her, pulling the coat tight around her shoulders. Above the stars wheeled slowly through the clear mountain sky. She had never seen so many stars. In New York, the city lights had hidden them. In the orphanage, she had rarely looked up at all. Eli, she said quietly, yes, if this does not work, if we cannot get the ledger, or if Madsen catches us, or if... She took a breath. I want you to know that whatever happens these last few days have been the first time since my parents died that I have felt like I belong somewhere. Eli was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice so soft she almost did not hear it, he said, Get some rest, Clara. We have a long way to go. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, sleep came without nightmares. Miles away in a grand house on the edge of Fayetteville, Judge Harland Voss sat behind his mahogany desk listening to Deputy Madson's report. "They left the mountain," Madson said, "heading south through the back country, the rancher and the girl." Voss swirled the whiskey in his glass. He was 55 years old with silver hair and the kind of distinguished features that made people trust him on sight. He had built his empire on that trust. And the brothers, still at the cabin, 4 men if you count the old one. Then we have an opportunity. Voss smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Send word to our friends in Little Rock. Tell them to gather men, good men, men who understand that some problems require permanent solutions." "And Blackwood?" "The girl. Let them come to Vance's house. Let them find the ledger. Let them think they have won." Voss finished his whiskey. "And while they are celebrating their victory, we will burn everything they love to the ground." Morning brought gray skies and the threat of rain. They pushed on through the drizzle, moving faster now that they were deeper into the wilderness and farther from any road Madson's men might patrol. By mid-afternoon, they had reached the edge of the mountains, looking down on the outskirts of Fayetteville. The town sprawled across the valley below like a sleeping beast. Church steeples and water towers rose above the lower buildings. Smoke drifted from chimneys. People moved through the streets tiny from this distance, going about their ordinary lives with no idea of the darkness that festered at the heart of their community. "Vance's house," Eli said, pointing to a large structure on the eastern edge of town. "The one with the red roof." Clara followed his gaze. Even from here the house looked imposing. 2 stories tall, built of brick rather than wood, with a wraparound porch and manicured gardens. It was the house of a wealthy man, a respectable man, a man who could buy and sell human beings without anyone suspecting a thing. "We wait until dark," Eli continued. "Then we go in." They spent the remaining hours of daylight resting and watching. Clara pointed out the windows. She remembered the layout of the ground floor, the location of Vance's study where the ledger was hidden. Eli listened carefully, committing every detail to memory. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, Eli performed a final check of his weapons. Rifle, pistol, hunting knife, each one cleaned and loaded and ready. "If things go wrong in there," he said without looking at Clara, "you run. Do not wait for me. Do not try to help. Just run back up the mountain. Caleb will protect you." "I am not leaving you behind." "I was not asking for your permission." Clara stepped in front of him, blocking his view, forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me, Eli Blackwood. I have spent my entire life running from the cholera that killed my family, running from the orphanage, running from Vance. I am done running. Whatever happens in that house tonight, we face it together. Do you understand?" Eli looked at her, really looked at her. She was barely 20 years old. She weighed maybe 100 pounds soaking wet. She had no training, no experience, nothing but a fire in her eyes that refused to be extinguished. She was magnificent. "Together," he said finally. They moved down the mountain as the last light faded from the sky. Vance's house was quiet when they reached it. A single lamp burned in an upstairs window. No guards visible, though Eli knew that meant nothing. Men like Vance did not advertise their security. They approached from the rear, using the garden's hedges and ornamental trees for cover. Clara led the way. Now her memories of the house's layout guiding them through the darkness to a servant's entrance she had used during her brief captivity. The door was locked, but Eli made short work of it with his knife. They slipped inside into a narrow hallway that smelled of cooking grease and old tobacco. "The study is this way," Clara whispered. They crept through the darkened house, past closed doors and sleeping rooms, up a flight of stairs to the second floor where Vance conducted his business. The study door was at the end of the hall, and beneath it a thin line of light was visible. Someone was inside. Eli motioned for Clara to stay back. He drew his pistol, checked the load one final time, and slowly turned the doorknob. The door swung open silently. Luther Vance sat behind his desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand, a smile on his face. He looked like a man who had been expecting company. "Mr. Blackwood," he said pleasantly. "I wondered when you would arrive. Please come in. Bring the girl with you." Eli kept his pistol raised. "How did you know?" "Madsen had men watching the mountain. They saw you leave last night. It was not difficult to guess where you were going." Vance took a sip of his whiskey. "You should have run the other way, gone to Little Rock, made your accusations to the federal marshals. Of course, no one would have believed you. A girl from the orphan train and a hermit from the mountains accusing a respected judge of human trafficking." He laughed softly. "You would have been laughed out of the territory." "Maybe, but we are not going to Little Rock." Eli stepped into the room, his gun trained on Vance's chest. "We are taking your ledger, the one with all the names and dates and amounts, and then we are going to make sure that everyone in Arkansas knows exactly what kind of man Judge Harlan Voss really is." For just a moment something flickered in Vance's eyes. Fear, uncertainty. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same confident smile. "The ledger," he repeated. "You mean this ledger?" He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a leather-bound book. He held it up, letting the lamplight play across its worn cover. "Is this what you came all this way for? Is this what you risked your lives to obtain?" Clara stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the book. "That is it. Give it to us." "Certainly." Vance set the ledger on the desk and pushed it toward them. "Take it. It is yours." Neither Eli nor Clara moved. "What game are you playing?" Eli demanded. "No game. I am simply a practical man who recognizes when he has been beaten." Vance spread his hands in a gesture of surrender. "You want the ledger? Take it. You want to destroy Voss? Be my guest. I never liked the man anyway, too arrogant by half." "You are lying." "Am I?" Vance leaned back in his chair. "Think about it, Mr. Blackwood. What do I have to gain by stopping you? If Voss falls, I can claim I was coerced, a victim myself. I will lose some money, yes, but I will keep my freedom. Whereas if I try to fight you here tonight, I might end up with a bullet in my chest." Eli's finger tightened on the trigger. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that Vance was stalling for something. But the ledger was right there within reach, the key to bringing down the entire operation. "Clara," he said quietly, "take it." She moved forward slowly, her eyes never leaving Vance's face. She reached for the ledger, her fingers brushed the leather cover, and then the study door burst open behind them. Madsen stood in the doorway, flanked by 4 armed men. His pistol was drawn and aimed directly at Eli's back. "Drop the gun, Blackwood," the deputy said. "It is over." For a long, terrible moment, nobody moved. Eli stood frozen, his pistol still pointed at Vance, knowing that if he turned to face Madsen, Vance would have a clear shot at Clara, knowing that if he did not turn, Madsen would shoot him in the back. "I said drop it." Madsen repeated, his voice harder now. "I will not ask again." Eli lowered his pistol slowly, placed it on the floor, raised his hands. "Now kick it away." He did. Madsen stepped into the room, his men spreading out to cover every angle. He looked at Clara with an expression of cold satisfaction. "Did you really think you could escape?" he asked her. "Did you really think some rancher from the mountains could protect you from us?" Clara said nothing. Her hand was still on the ledger, her fingers white-knuckled against its cover. "Take your hand off the book," Madsen ordered, slowly. Instead of complying, Clara lifted the ledger from the desk. She held it in front of her like a shield. "You cannot shoot me," she said. "If you do, you will never know who else I have told. Who else knows what is in this book?" Madsen laughed. "Brave words from a girl with no cards left to play. Who would you have told the rancher, his brothers?" He shook his head. "They will all be dead by morning. Voss's men are riding for Blackwood Mountain right now. By the time the sun rises, there will be nothing left but ashes." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. Caleb, Jonah, Silas. The men who had protected her, sheltered her, treated her like family when she had no family left. They were going to die because of her. "No," she whispered. "No, you cannot." "I can. I will. and there is nothing you or your mountain man can do to stop it." Eli had not moved since surrendering his weapon. He stood perfectly still, his hands raised, his eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance. To anyone watching, he looked like a man who had accepted defeat. But inside his mind was racing. The window behind Vance's desk. He had noticed it when they entered, large enough for a person to fit through. A 15-foot drop to the garden below, survivable if you knew how to fall. The lamp on Vance's desk, oil burning, hot, if it were knocked over. The ledger in Clara's hands, the proof they needed, the key to everything. "Clara," Eli said softly. She looked at him. "When I move, you jump through the window behind Vance. Do not stop. Do not look back. Just run." Madsen frowned. "What are you—" Eli moved. He was 49 years old and had not fought in a war for over 2 decades. But the body remembers what the mind forgets. He spun, grabbed the lamp from Vance's desk, and hurled it at Madsen in one fluid motion. The glass shattered. Oil splashed across the deputy's coat. Flames erupted. Madsen screamed. His men opened fire, but Eli was already diving behind the desk, grabbing Clara, pulling her toward the window. Glass shattered around them as bullets tore through the study. He felt something hot graze his arm, but ignored it. There was no time for pain. They hit the window together, tumbled through, fell 15 feet to the garden below. Eli landed hard, rolling to absorb the impact, dragging Clara with him. She cried out but kept hold of the ledger. Behind them, the second floor was beginning to burn. "Run!" Eli gasped. "Now!" They ran, through the garden, over the wall, into the streets of Fayetteville, where confused citizens were emerging from their homes to stare at the burning mansion on the hill. They ran until Clara's legs gave out, until she collapsed against an alley wall, gasping for breath, the ledger clutched to her chest like a holy relic. Eli knelt beside her. His arm was bleeding where the bullet had grazed him, but he barely felt it. All he could think about was what Madsen had said. "Voss's men are riding for Blackwood Mountain right now." "We have to go back," he said. "Caleb and the others. We will never make it in time." Clara looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Eli, we will never—" "Then we find another way." He pulled her to her feet. They could hear shouting behind them now, men organizing, searching. Madsen might be burned, but his men were not. They would be coming soon. "There is a telegraph office on Main Street," Eli said. "We get there. We send a message to the federal marshals in Little Rock. We tell them everything, names, dates, the location of the attack on my brothers." "Will it be fast enough?" Eli did not answer. He did not know. But it was the only chance they had. They emerged from the alley into the chaos of the burning night. Behind them, Vance's mansion blazed like a beacon lighting up the sky with orange flame. Ahead of them, somewhere in the darkness, an army was riding toward Blackwood Mountain, and in Clara's hands, pressed against her heart, was the ledger that could save them all or condemn them forever. The race was on. The telegraph office sat at the corner of Main Street and Oak, a small wooden building with a single lamp burning in its window. At this hour, with half the town rushing toward the fire at Vance's mansion, the street was nearly empty. Eli pushed through the door, Clara close behind him. The telegraph operator, a thin man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers, looked up from his desk with startled eyes. "We are closed," he began. Eli pulled a gold coin from his pocket and slapped it on the counter. "You are open now. Send a message to the United States Marshal's office in Little Rock. Priority urgent." The operator stared at the coin. It was more money than he made in a month. His hesitation lasted exactly 2 seconds. "What is the message?" Eli dictated while Clara kept watch at the window. He told the marshals everything. Judge Harlan Voss, Deputy Rohr Madsen, the orphan train operation, the ledger in their possession, the attack currently underway at Blackwood Mountain. "Add this," Eli said as the operator's fingers flew across the telegraph key. "Multiple witnesses, evidence secured, request immediate assistance, lives at stake." The machine chattered and clicked, sending their desperate plea across 100 miles of wire to the only authority that might be able to help them. "Message sent," the operator said, looking up with wide eyes. "Is all of that true about Judge Voss?" "Every word." "Lord have mercy." The man crossed himself. "Voss has dinner at my sister's house twice a year. Her children call him Uncle Harland." "Then your sister should be careful about who she invites to dinner." Eli turned to leave, but the operator called after him. "Wait, there is a reply coming through." The machine chattered again. The operator transcribed the message, his face growing paler with each word. "Marshal Reeves acknowledges he is dispatching men immediately, but—" The operator looked up. "He says it will take at least 6 to 8 hours for them to reach Fayetteville. They are already in the area investigating another case. Maybe 10 hours to get to your mountain if they ride hard. 12 hours. By then, Caleb and Silas and everyone at the cabin could be dead." "Is there anything else?" Clara asked. "Yes, one more line." The operator read it slowly. "Message reads, 'Hold the line. Help is coming. Bass Reeves.'" Bass Reeves. Even Eli had heard that name. The most famous lawman in the territories. A former slave who had become the most successful marshal in American history. If Reeves was coming personally, there was hope. But hope meant nothing if his brothers died before it arrived. "We need horses," Eli said. "Fast ones." They found them at the livery stable 3 blocks away. The stable master was gone, probably watching the fire like everyone else, so Eli left another gold coin on the hook and took the 2 best mounts he could find. A black stallion for himself, a gray mare for Clara. They rode out of Fayetteville at a gallop, leaving the burning mansion and the chaos behind them. The mountain trail was treacherous in the darkness. What had taken them a day and a half on foot would take 6 hours on horseback if they pushed the animals hard and did not break their necks on the rocky paths. Eli led the way, his body moving with the rhythm of the horse beneath him, his mind focused on a single thought: faster. He had to go faster. Behind him, Clara kept pace with a determination that surprised him. She was not an experienced rider, that much was obvious from the way she gripped the reins too tightly and bounced in the saddle. But she did not complain. She did not fall behind. She simply endured the same way she had endured everything else life had thrown at her. They stopped once at a stream to let the horses drink and catch their breath. Clara dismounted and nearly collapsed, her legs trembling from the unaccustomed strain. "How much farther?" she asked. 4 hours. Maybe 5. "Will we make it in time?" Eli looked at the sky. The stars were beginning to fade in the east. Dawn was coming. "I do not know," he admitted, "but we will try." Clara nodded. She walked to the stream and splashed water on her face, washing away the sweat and grime of their escape. When she turned back to him, her expression had changed. The fear was still there, but it had been pushed aside by something harder, something fiercer. "Eli, if we do not make it in time, if your brothers are already—" She could not finish the sentence. "I want you to know that none of this is your fault. You tried to help me. You did more than anyone has ever done. And Clara, please, let me finish." She took a breath. "I have spent my whole life believing that I was not worth saving, that I was just another orphan, another burden, another mouth to feed that no one wanted. But you looked at me and saw something else. You saw a person, a human being worth protecting." Her voice cracked. "Whatever happens tonight, I will never forget that. I will never forget you." Eli stood very still. The stream murmured beside them. The horses stamped and blew. Above, the last stars faded into the growing light. "We are going to make it," he said quietly. "And when this is over, we are going to have a long conversation about what comes next, about what kind of life you want to build, about where you want to build it." He paused. "And about whether you might want to build it here, on the mountain, with us." Clara stared at him. "With you. With all of us. Me, Caleb, Jonah. We are not a conventional family, Clara. We are three broken men living on a mountain trying to make sense of a world that has given us more pain than we probably deserved. But we have room. We have love to give. And if you wanted to stay—" He did not finish. He did not need to. The look in Clara's eyes said everything. "Ask me again," she said softly. "When this is over, when we are all safe, ask me again, and I will give you my answer." They mounted their horses and rode on. The sun was cresting the eastern peaks when they heard the gunfire. It echoed through the valleys like thunder-sharp cracks that could only mean one thing. The attack had begun. Eli spurred his horse harder, pushing the exhausted animal to its limits. Beside him, Clara did the same. The mountain trail flew beneath them, trees blurring past rocks, scattering under hooves. They crested the final ridge and looked down at Blackwood Mountain. The cabin was still standing. That was the first thing Eli noticed, and it sent a wave of relief crashing through him. But it was surrounded. At least a dozen men on horseback had formed a loose circle around the property, taking cover behind trees and outbuildings, firing at the cabin's windows. Return fire came from inside. Caleb's rifle, Eli recognized the sound, and Silas's old shotgun. They were alive. They were fighting back, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. It was only a matter of time. "Stay here," Eli told Clara. "Hide in the trees. Do not come out until—" "No. Clara, this is not a discussion." "You are right. It is not." She pulled out the ledger and held it up. "This is what they want. This is why they are attacking. If I ride down there and offer to trade myself for your brothers—" "Absolutely not. Listen to me." Her voice was steady, her eyes clear. "I ride down there. I show them the ledger. I tell them I will hand it over if they let everyone in the cabin go. While they are focused on me, you circle around and hit them from behind. And what happens to you? You come for me, like you did on the trail, like you always do." Eli wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed that this was insane, that he could not send her into the middle of a firefight, that there had to be another way. But there was no other way, and they were out of time. "If anything happens to you," he began, "then you will burn the whole territory down. I know." She smiled, and in that smile was all the courage of a woman who had finally found something worth fighting for. "Do not be late, Eli Blackwood." She spurred her horse and rode down the mountain before he could stop her. The gunfire stopped the moment Clara emerged from the tree line. She rode slowly, deliberately, holding the ledger above her head where everyone could see it. The men surrounding the cabin turned their weapons toward her, but none of them fired. They knew what she carried. They knew what it meant. "Hold your fire," a voice called out. A man on a chestnut mare separated from the others and rode toward her. Even from a distance, Eli could see the silver badge on his chest. Madsen, alive. His coat was burned, his face blistered on one side, but he was very much alive. "Miss Whitmore," the deputy's voice carried across the clearing, "you have caused me a great deal of trouble, and I intend to cause you more." Clara's voice did not waver. "Unless you listen to what I have to say." "I am listening. Let the men in the cabin go, all of them. Let them ride away unharmed. In exchange, I will give you the ledger and come with you willingly." Madsen laughed. It was an ugly sound full of pain and rage. "You still do not understand, do you?" Clara's voice grew stronger. "I was not traded like a horse. I was not bought like cattle. I chose to run. I chose to fight. I chose to stand here facing you because this is my life, and I will decide what happens to it. Not Voss, not Vance, not you." "Then why have you not attacked already?" Clara tilted her head. "You could have rushed the cabin hours ago, taken it by force, but you did not. Do you know why?" Madsen said nothing. "Because you do not know how many copies I made. You do not know who else has seen what is inside. You do not know if killing me will bury the secret or spread it to every newspaper in the territory." Clara smiled. "The moment I die, letters go out, to the marshals, to the newspapers, to the governor himself. Everything Voss has built, everything you have helped him do, exposed for the world to see." It was a bluff. a desperate, impossible bluff. But Madsen did not know that. "You are lying," he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Are you willing to bet your life on that? Are you willing to bet Voss's freedom?" Clara lowered the ledger slowly, holding it in front of her like a shield. "Let them go. Take me. And maybe we can find a way out of this where everyone survives." Madsen stared at her for a long moment. Behind him his men shifted uneasily in their saddles. They had signed up to intimidate witnesses and silence troublemakers. They had not signed up for a political scandal that could bring down the most powerful man in the county. "All right," Madsen said finally. "The men in the cabin can leave. But you come with me. And you hand over that ledger. Now." Clara nodded. She dismounted slowly and began walking toward Madsen, the ledger extended in front of her. That was when Eli attacked. He came out of the trees like a force of nature, rifle blazing, riding straight into the heart of Madsen's men. The first shot took down a rider on the left flank. The second dropped one on the right. By the time they realized what was happening, 3 of them were down and the rest were scrambling for cover. At the same moment, the cabin door burst open. Caleb and Silas came out shooting their fire, covering Clara as she dove behind a water trough. Jonah, who had arrived at the cabin only hours before, Voss's men appeared from the barn with a shotgun in each hand. The clearing erupted into chaos. Eli fought with the cold efficiency of a man who had survived 100 battles. He did not think about the men he was shooting. He did not see their faces or wonder about their families. They were obstacles. They were threats. They were between him and the people he loved. One by one they fell. Madsen tried to run. He spurred his horse toward the eastern trail, toward escape, toward the hope that he might survive this disaster and find protection with Voss. Eli cut him off. The deputy wheeled his horse around, his pistol rising, but Eli was faster. He shot the gun out of Madsen's hand, then closed the distance between them before the man could recover. "Get down," Eli said, his rifle pointed at Madsen's chest. "Now." Madsen dismounted slowly, clutching his injured hand. His face was a mask of hatred, but beneath it Eli could see the fear. This was a man who had spent his life hiding behind a badge and other men's violence. Now faced with the reality of his own mortality, he was nothing. "You think this changes anything?" Madsen spat. "Voss will send more men. He will burn this whole mountain to the ground. You cannot protect her forever." "I will not have to." Eli jerked his head toward the eastern ridge where a line of riders had appeared against the morning sky. "Look." Madsen turned. His face went white. The riders wore the uniforms of the United States Marshal Service. At their head rode a tall black man on a white horse, his silver badge catching the first rays of sunlight. Bass Reeves had arrived. The aftermath was swift and thorough. Reeves and his deputies took Madsen and the surviving attackers into custody. They collected statements from Eli, Clara, Caleb, Jonah, and Silas. They examined the ledger, their expressions growing darker with each page they turned. "This is worse than I expected," Reeves said, his deep voice heavy with anger. "Girls bought and sold like livestock, some of them no older than 14. He looked at Clara. "You are very brave, Miss Whitmore. What you did going back into that man's house facing Madsen alone, it takes a special kind of courage." "I had help," Clara said, glancing at Eli. "You had each other." Reeves nodded slowly. "That is how the best battles are won." He closed the ledger and tucked it under his arm. "Judge Voss will be arrested by nightfall. His network will be dismantled. The girls who can be found will be freed." His jaw tightened. "The ones who cannot, we will do everything in our power to find out what happened to them. I give you my word." "What happens now?" Caleb asked. "Now you heal. You rest. You rebuild what was damaged." Reeves looked around at the bullet-scarred cabin, the broken windows, the bodies being loaded into a wagon for transport to Fayetteville. "You have earned it." He mounted his horse and prepared to lead his men away. But at the last moment he turned back. "Mr. Blackwood." Eli looked up. "I have been a lawman for 20 years. I have met a lot of men who talk about justice and honor and protecting the innocent. Most of them are full of hot air." Reeves smiled, the first smile anyone had seen from him that day. "You are not most men. This territory needs more people like you." He rode away, his deputies following, leaving the Blackwood family standing in the ruins of their home. For a long moment, nobody spoke. They simply stood there, 5 people bound together by blood and circumstance and a battle they had never expected to fight. The morning sun warmed their faces, the mountain wind stirred their hair, and somewhere in the valley below, church bells began to ring, celebrating a new day that had almost never come. It was Jonah who broke the silence. "I need a drink," he said. And despite everything, despite the death and the fear and the wounds that would take months to heal, they all laughed. 1 week later, the cabin had been repaired, new glass in the windows, fresh boards over the bullet holes, a coat of paint on the front porch to cover the bloodstains that no amount of scrubbing could quite remove. Life on Blackwood Mountain had returned to something like normal. The horses needed tending, the crops needed harvesting. The endless work of a frontier homestead continued indifferent to the drama that had played out on its soil. But some things had changed. Clara had not left. She had stayed through the repairs and the recovery, through the sleepless nights when the nightmares came and the quiet days when they did not. She had cooked meals and mended clothes and learned to ride properly on the gray mare that Eli had given her as a gift. She had become in ways that none of them could quite define a part of the family. Now, on a warm evening with the sun setting over the western peaks, she found Eli sitting alone on the porch where it had all begun. "May I join you?" she asked. He moved over to make room. They sat in silence for a while, watching the colors change across the sky. Orange to red to purple to the deep blue of approaching night. The beauty of it made Clara's chest ache in ways she did not fully understand. "I got a letter from Marshal Reeves today," she said finally. "What did it say?" "Voss has been convicted. He will spend the rest of his life in prison. Madsen, too." She paused. "They found some of the girls. 11 of them scattered across 3 states. They are being reunited with whatever family they have left or placed with proper families if they have none." "Good. It is because of you. Because you found me on that trail and chose to help instead of walk away. All those girls are free because of a decision you made in a single moment." Eli shook his head. "It was because of you. You were the one who heard the conversation. You were the one who ran. You were the one who held on to that ledger when any sensible person would have dropped it and fled." "Then perhaps we should share the credit." "Perhaps we should." Clara turned to face him. In the fading light she could see every line on his face, every scar, every mark left by a life of hard work and harder choices. He was not a young man. He was not a handsome man, at least not in the conventional sense. But when she looked at him, she saw strength. She saw kindness. She saw the person who had given her back her life. "You said to ask you again," she reminded him. "When it was over, when we were safe." Eli met her eyes. "I remember. So I am asking." She took a breath. "Do you still want me to stay?" "Yes. Even knowing what I am, an orphan with nothing, a woman with no family, no dowry, no prospects. You are none of those things." Eli reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough and warm against her fingers. "You are the bravest person I have ever met. You are the strongest woman I have ever known, and you are not alone anymore. You have a family here. You have me." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Eli, stay. Build a life here, with me, with Caleb and Jonah and Silas. Let us be the family you never had." He paused, and when he spoke again his voice was barely above a whisper. "Let me be the man who stands beside you whatever comes." Clara did not answer with words. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was not a passionate kiss. It was not the kind of kiss that happened in dime novels and romantic plays. It was soft and gentle and tentative, the kiss of 2 wounded people who had finally found their way to each other. When they pulled apart, Eli was smiling, actually smiling for perhaps the first time since she had known him. "I take it that is a yes," he said. "That is a yes." From inside the cabin came the sound of Jonah's fiddle playing a melody that was sweet and hopeful and full of possibility. Caleb's laughter rang out, followed by Silas's gruff voice telling him to shut up and let the music speak. Clara leaned her head against Eli's shoulder and closed her eyes. For the first time in her memory, she was not afraid of what tomorrow might bring. She was home. But even as the music played and the stars emerged overhead, a letter was making its way up the mountain trail. A letter with no return address and neat, careful handwriting that Eli would not recognize. It would arrive in the morning, and when he read it, he would understand that some stories do not end simply because the villain has been defeated. Some stories are only just beginning. Weeks passed. The letter had arrived, as Clara predicted, carried by a rider who did not stay long enough to answer questions. Eli had read it in silence, his face growing harder with each line. Then he had folded it carefully and placed it in his pocket without a word. Later that night, after the others had gone to bed, Clara found him sitting by the fire staring into the flames with the look of a man preparing for war. "What did it say?" she asked. Eli handed her the letter. She read it slowly, her heart growing cold as the words sank in. "Mr. Blackwood, you have interfered in matters that do not concern you. You have destroyed years of careful work. You have cost powerful people a great deal of money." Judge Voss was merely a face, a functionary. The operation you disrupted will continue with or without him. There are others who share our vision, others who understand that some people are meant to be bought and sold and others are meant to do the buying. You cannot stop us. You cannot hide from us. Sooner or later we will come for what is ours. The girl belongs to us. She always has. We will be seeing you soon. Sincerely, a friend. Clara looked up, her hands trembling. "They are not going to stop," she whispered. "No." Eli took the letter back and tossed it into the fire, watching as the flames consumed it. "They are not." "What do we do?" Eli stood and walked to the window, looking out at the mountain that had been his refuge for 15 years. The mountain that was now a fortress, a home, a place worth defending. "We do what we have always done," he said quietly. "We stand our ground. We protect our family. And when they come, we make sure they regret it." Clara moved to stand beside him. She slipped her hand into his, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip. "Together," she asked. "Together." Outside, the wind stirred the pines. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. And somewhere in the darkness, invisible but inevitable, the future was taking shape. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The next morning, Eli gathered everyone in the main room of the cabin. Caleb, Jonah, Silas, Clara, the 5 people who had become a family in the crucible of violence and survival. "I received a letter last night," Eli said. "A threat, from people connected to Voss's network." He told them everything, the contents of the letter, the implications, the danger that still lurked on the horizon. When he finished, silence filled the room. Then Caleb spoke. "So, what is the plan?" "The plan is simple. We stay vigilant. We stay together. And we make this mountain into something they will regret trying to take." "Sounds like a lot of work," Jonah observed. "It will be." "Good." Jonah smiled his gentle smile. "I was getting bored anyway." Silas cleared his throat. "There is something else we need to discuss. Something that has been on all our minds but nobody has said out loud." He looked at Clara, then at Eli, then back at Clara. "This woman has lived in this house for weeks now. She has eaten at our table, slept under our roof, fought alongside us against men who wanted to kill us. She has become, for all practical purposes, a member of this family." Silas paused. "But the world does not see it that way. The world sees an unmarried woman living with 4 unmarried men, and the world has opinions about that sort of thing." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Silas, I am not finished." The old man held up a hand. "I used to be a minister. I may have lost my faith in churches and institutions, but I never lost my belief in the sacred bonds that tie people together. Love, loyalty, the commitment to stand by each other through whatever comes. He looked at Eli. "You love this woman. Do not deny it. I have seen the way you look at her when you think no one is watching." Eli said nothing, but he did not deny it. "And you?" Silas turned to Clara. "You love him. Maybe you love all of us in different ways. Maybe this family we have built is something the world has no name for. But it is real, it is true, and it deserves to be honored." He reached into his coat and pulled out a worn Bible, the same Bible he had carried with him since his wife died 20 years ago. "I cannot perform a legal marriage. I no longer have that authority. But I can perform a ceremony of commitment, a promise made before God and witnesses binding you together as family in a way that no court or judge can take away." Clara felt tears streaming down her face. She looked at Eli, at Caleb, at Jonah, at this strange and beautiful family that had claimed her as their own. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I want that." The ceremony was simple. They gathered on the porch as the sun set over Blackwood Mountain, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Silas stood before them with his Bible open, his voice carrying the weight of years and wisdom and hard-won peace. He spoke of love that defied convention, of family that transcended blood, of the courage it took to choose each other day after day in a world that did not always understand. And when the time came for vows, Clara spoke from her heart. "I came to you on a train meant for orphans," she said, looking at each of them in turn. "You bought me for kitchen work. But you taught me something far more important. You taught me what it means to belong, what it means to be chosen, what it means to have a home." She turned to Eli, taking his hands in hers. "I do not know what the future holds. I do not know if we will face more enemies, more battles, more nights of fear and uncertainty. But I know this. Whatever comes, I want to face it with you, with all of you, as a family, as partners, as the people who chose each other when the whole world tried to tear us apart." Eli's response was characteristically brief, but his eyes said everything his words could not. "I spent 15 years running from the world, running from love, running from the pain of losing someone I could not protect." He squeezed her hands. "You made me stop running. You gave me something worth standing still for, and I swear to you on everything I have and everything I am, I will never let you go." Silas smiled and closed his Bible. "What God has joined together," he said, "let no man tear asunder." Silas reached into his pocket and produced 4 simple gold bands purchased weeks ago in anticipation of this moment. "These rings symbolize your commitment, unbroken circles representing love without end." Clara placed a ring on Eli's finger, then received one in return. But because they could not explain 4 matching rings to the outside world, she threaded hers onto a chain around her neck, tucking it beneath her dress where only they would know. The kiss that followed was witnessed by the mountains, the stars, and 3 men who had become brothers in every way that mattered. That night, as the celebration wound down and the cabin grew quiet, Clara stood at the window of the room she now shared with Eli. The moon was rising over the eastern peaks, casting silver light across the valley below. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment: the cholera that killed her family, the orphanage that tried to break her spirit, the train that carried her west into an uncertain future, the monsters who saw her as property to be bought and sold. And then she thought about the man who had found her on a dusty trail, cut her bonds, and given her back her humanity. "What are you thinking about?" Eli asked from behind her. "About how strange life is," she said. "About how the worst things that happen to us can sometimes lead to the best things. About how I had to lose everything before I could find this." Eli wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. His breath was warm against her hair. "You did not find this," he said. "You built it. With your courage, with your strength, with your refusal to give up even when giving up would have been easier." Clara turned in his arms, looking up at his weathered face, his storm-gray eyes, the slight smile that she had learned to treasure because it came so rarely. "I love you," she said. The first time she had said those words to anyone since her parents died. "I love you too." The first time he had said those words to anyone since Emma. They held each other in the moonlight, two broken people who had somehow become whole. Outside the mountain stood Sentinel, ancient and patient, ready to protect its people through whatever storms might come. And let me ask you something. When was the last time you stood up for someone who could not stand up for themselves? When was the last time you chose to do the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it cost you something, even when the whole world seemed aligned against you? We live in a world that often tells us to mind our own business, to keep our heads down, to let other people's problems remain other people's problems. But here's what I have learned from Clara and Eli and the strange family they built on Blackwood Mountain. The moments that define us are not the moments when we play it safe. They are the moments when we see someone in trouble and choose to help. When we see injustice and choose to fight. When we see a stranger in need and choose to say, "You are not alone." Clara Whitmore came to Arkansas on a train meant for orphans. Nobody wanted her. Nobody saw her value. She was too old, too tall, too sharp-tongued for the families looking for compliant children to mold. But Eli Blackwood saw something else. He saw a survivor, a fighter, a human being worthy of respect and protection and love. And because he chose to see her, because he chose to act, everything changed. For Clara, for the other girls trapped in Voss's network, for the family that formed around them like a fortress of hope in a world full of darkness. One choice, one moment, one refusal to walk away. That is all it takes to change the world. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of the power of standing up for what is right, take a moment to like this video. It helps more than you might think. And if you know someone who is carrying a heavy burden in silence, someone who needs to be reminded that they are not alone, share this with them. Sometimes a story is the lifeline a person needs. I would love to know where you are watching from right now. What time is it in your part of the world? Leave a comment and tell me. I read every single one. Because here is the final truth that Clara and Eli taught us. One honest choice can turn an orphan nobody wanted into a woman with a home. One act of courage can transform a mountain hermit into a protector and husband. One moment of kindness can ripple outward, touching lives you will never know, changing futures you will never see. And it is never too late to make that choice. It is never too late to choose a better way forward. On Blackwood Mountain the sun is setting. In the cabin a fiddle is playing. And a family that should not exist by all the rules the world has written is sitting down to dinner together. They made it. Against all odds, against all enemies, against everything that tried to tear them apart. They made it. And so can you.